Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for being with us. Happy New Year, and I hope everyone had a Merry Christmas. There's been a change in our lineup this evening. Tiffany Boyd could not be with us tonight, but we will get her back on the schedule at a later date. As you know, this show focuses primarily on state politics with some federal issues thrown in here and there, and I also like to focus on the original intention of our Constitution. I also spend some time on the war for Southern independence and like to stress that the true lost cause was the republic our founders gave us. To me, this is more than a historical debate. The impact of that lost republic has been a detrimental effect on has had a detrimental effect on our understanding of the Constitution as intended and therefore our rights and freedoms. We have become deferential to federal power in areas that they were never intended to have power, and in most cases, in clear violation of the actual wording of the Constitution. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, I think it's important to get it right, and a big part of getting it right is recognizing that the Declaration of Independence didn't create a nation, but declared 13 sovereign free states. By the way, the Treaty of Paris, ending the war for independence, declared each state by name to be free and sovereign independent states. So when the Articles of Confederation were ratified, that was the understanding. When the Constitution of 1787 was ratified by the conventions of the people in the states, and according to that Constitution, the states and the people retained all powers not delegated to the federal government. Notice I said delegated, not forever granted. So exactly when did we become the consolidated government that our founders feared? Well, it happened incrementally, but obviously the erroneously named Civil War was the primary event that led to the federal beast we live under today. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was among one of his speeches used to justify his coercive actions against the sovereign states that voted to leave the Union, and still used by many so-called historians and others to advance the idea of one consolidated nation with an all-powerful federal government being the intent of the founders. Neocons such as Mark Levin, Bill O'Reilly, Glenn Beck, and others love to quote the Gettysburg Address and love to beat the South over the head on the issue of slavery and racism while painting the North and supporters of the Union as fulfilling what they claimed the Declaration's goal was, the idea of a proposition nation that all men are created equal. But was the Gettysburg Address an accurate portrait of our history, or Lincoln's real goals, or was it just propaganda void of merit? Was it more for a European audience than an American audience? Our guest tonight is Paul C. Graham, co-founder, co-owner, and managing director of Shotwell Publishing. He is the author of several books, including Nonsense on Stilts, The Gettysburg Address, and Lincoln's Imaginary Nation, which will be covered tonight, and When the Yankees Come. Former Carolina slaves remember Sherman's March to the Sea, which we'll cover as well. He's also written several other books as well as numerous articles, and has appeared on notable platforms such as CBS News, BBC, the AP, and the Daily Ledger. Paul is a native of South Carolina and holds a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy from the University of South Carolina. Paul will join us in a minute, but first, it's time for the Informer Report. Okay, unless you're living under a rock, you know, of course, that we've extracted Maduro from Venezuela. As I said on the last show, no matter what you think of Venezuela, Maduro, or Trump, our country allegedly operates under a constitution. That constitution was deliberately designed by the founders not to allow the president to be the sole decision maker on whether or not we have a war, or to create a situation to get us in a war by committing acts of war or aggression. One of the lessons from British history and world history in general was that a king or queen's ability to declare war or create a situation that leads to war could ruin a country. That's why only Congress can declare war and or take lesser measures as needed. It doesn't have to be a full declaration of war. The first 4 presidents followed that restriction. Even James Monroe, the 5th president and author of the Monroe Doctrine, often erroneously cited as a declaration that the U.S. would intervene in any conflict or threat in the Western Hemisphere, followed that restriction. Presidents always have the right to order defensive actions or provide additional security, but anything offensive requires congressional authorization. Now, I know that's a problem today. We know we can't trust our Congress, but that is something we're going to have to figure out. It's really dangerous to allow one person, regardless who that is. And look, I voted for Trump. Given the same choices, I'd vote for him again. But we have to follow the Constitution if it's supposed to actually mean anything. So we have now attacked another nation and extradited their leader, Maduro. I understand he wasn't properly elected. I got all that. But you know what? Most of the other leaders we deal with, whether you're talking China, Russia, you name it, they're not democratically elected either. So that seems kind of as a deflection to me. Maduro, we brought him here, and he's going to stand trial on drug charges. Now, Trump announced that we will run Venezuela until new leadership is in place and the country is stable. That sounds to me like nation building. What could possibly go wrong? It's already been mentioned that other Maduro supporters control the military and courts. Where in the Constitution does the president get the authority to run another country? Support or opposition, for the most part, breaks down along party lines. Past presidential actions are cited. But what is the standard? The standard is not so-and-so did it. The standard is the Constitution. That should be the standard. And Republicans who claim to be conservative and claim to believe in the Constitution, that should be our standard. Neither party, but here is the truth of the matter. Neither party really gives a damn about the Constitution. And they haven't for years. You go back to the 1840s, and Calhoun pointed this out, that the party out of power only mentions the Constitution when they're out of power and they don't like something that's being done. And when they're back in power, the Constitution doesn't matter again. How this turns out remains to be seen as far as the situation in Venezuela. I'm sure there are other things going on that we may not know about. I never did believe that the whole drug deal. Let's remember, too, they're bringing fentanyl. They told us for how long that most of the fentanyl, the raw material, was coming from China, and it was being produced in Mexico and brought across the border. So never did really buy the whole drug thing. We are not the world's policemen, even in the Western Hemisphere. Trump is threatening other countries. Is this the new standard? Remember, we'll have a Democrat president eventually. Is he going to point back to say, well, Trump did it? And we're going to say, oh, yeah, you're right. Trump did it, so it must have been okay. None of the criminals here have been dealt with yet in this country. The 4 years of garbage that we put up with under Biden, and really, going back to the first Trump administration, all the criminal actions against the president, nothing's happened yet. We get a lot of talk, but we don't get a whole lot of action. Communists and Muslims seem to be running the show in this country, and rhinos continue to undercut the administration on some important issues and things that he has done. We'll talk more about that after we say goodbye to our guests, but be sure to stick around to the end. My point is, the Constitution is what we should be supporting, not what our guy does if it's wrong, if it's unconstitutional. We may like the results, and I hope this turns out well for us, but we have to be consistent if our Constitution is to mean anything. That wraps up this installment of the Informer Report. If you have a news story that you want to alert us to, be sure to send us an email at tennesseeinformer.tv@gmail.com. Before we bring on our special guest, here is a message from our sponsor, LifeWave, a unique product that uses light reflection to activate the body's own natural energy, supporting healing, improving performance, and combating aging without drugs or stimulants. Check it out, and we'll be right back.
Light, the energy of life itself. Since the beginning of time, light has sustained us, fueled our growth, and shaped the world. Even Einstein recognized that everything we are is made of light. But what if we could harness the light within us, not just to live, but to renew, restore, and rejuvenate? Introducing LifeWave X39, the first product in the world that activates stem cells using our body's own light. Backed by clinical research, multiple patents, and over 10 years of stem cell research, a revolutionary wearable light technology that unlocks the power of activating our own stem cells with a single, safe, affordable, non-transdermal patch that puts you back in control of how you look, feel, and perform. Unlike drugs or chemicals, X39 works naturally, awakening your body's ability to heal and thrive. It's time to unlock your full potential, restore your vitality, and embrace a healthier, more vibrant you.
Now to our guest, co-founder, co-owner, and managing director of Shotwell Publishing, as well as a successful author in his own right, Paul Graham. Paul, thanks for being with us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's such a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Excited about this program and all that you're doing here for the Tennessee and Pullman.
Well, we're excited to have you, and we really appreciate what Shotwell does. They're one of the few voices of truth out there, to be honest with you. Before we start talking about Lincoln lies, the stinking Lincoln lies, as I like to call them, tell the audience a little bit about Shotwell Publishing, specifically why you created it and why it's important to you.
Okay. In 2015, you might have heard of the flag controversy down in Columbia, South Carolina. At that time, I was the media representative for the Midlands. I live near Columbia. And so after the Dylan Roof shooting back in 2015, there were some flag pictures that came up or something like that. To make a long story short, I spent all week down there trying to explain to people that one thing doesn't have to do with another, right, and that this boy is not a representative of who we are. Nobody's ever even heard of him. And just because he snapped some pictures, presumably, assuming they weren't photoshopped, of a flag, the naval jack, that he somehow determines how we remember our dead here in South Carolina. So after that was all over with, and I was still kind of spinning from that, I had lunch with Clyde Wilson, who I'd befriended over the years, and is many of you read his books, Defending Dixie, and From Union to Empire, and of course we've got several, we call them the Wilson Files, topic-based essays. And I said, I've been reading about this print-on-demand technology, and I think we ought to fight back a little bit with some short, hard-hitting, Southern titles that give our side of the story, not necessarily to that particular flag issue, but in general.
Right.
And we were able to, and we decided to start it. He already had one book that he was working on, and we finished that one up, and then, I watched YouTube videos and practiced and everything, and eventually we got pretty good. We now have over 100 books, somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 authors. I thought we were big stuff with 5 books. I'll be honest. This was never expected to grow any. I never expected it to grow any bigger than a few books, but we were able to at a similar time, the Pelican Press, which was the go-to for Southern authors for a long time, Pelican Publishing in Louisiana. I guess the father passed who was running things, and the kids took over, something like that. They jettisoned the entire Southern catalog, including The South Was Right and several other books. And so we were able to get those from the Kennedys, and, war crimes against Southern civilians. We got that from Mr. Cisco, and we were able to put them back out there. And, now we've got more work than we can possibly ever do, because it's going to keep coming in. But we're I know you're having Chris Edwards on.
Yep, next week
here shortly, And we're planning on releasing his 2-volume Quantrell biography later this week or early next week.
Yeah, I like the Shotwell, the books. I've read several different authors, and it's, you know, it's good to have a source that you can go to that,
Yeah.
you know, is dedicated to tell them. Now, every author is, you know, admittedly somewhat biased, but, you know, we've only got one side for our whole life and well beyond that.
We write for Southern people. If anybody else wants to, you know, tag along, that's fine. But I'm interested in our own people in the South, black and white, who have contributed to the culture and are a legitimate part of the South. There is no South unless we stop the bloodletting and the vandalism and the cultural genocide and these things, which, you know, sounds like it's bad. It's bad.
Well, it's a Marxist tactic, and, you know.
Yeah, and if you look at Soviet Union or China or any of them, they all had cultural revolutions. They all took down statues. I mean, this is all, you know, Marx 101. And, you know, I prefer not to live in a Marxist society, me personally.
Yeah, me too.
So, you know, I mean, call me old fashioned, but I prefer to stick with good old USA, the Constitution and particularly the Bill of Rights, that have been turned on their head as well.
Absolutely.
And so we've got a real mess.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get it. Yeah.
And I want to kind of get to where that mess started. And, you know, I think, you know, there's always been a difference of opinion, and we talked about this before the show started. You know, a lot of people don't know that it was 30 or 40 years before notes on the convention of the Constitution were put out. So people really didn't know what went on in there. And I think it was a while, you know, the Federalist Papers were already out. And the original, there was two authors originally, and I think the first one that kind of everybody followed for a long time, his interpretation, was St. George Tucker, which was very much aligned. We know now, especially since the journals from the Constitution are out, we know he's much more aligned with what they did. Well, then 30 years after that or thereabouts, you've got the Fables of Joseph Story, who pretty much just used the Federalist Papers, which the Federalist Papers are good in a way, but they're not the end-all be-all, and John Marshall's court opinions. And he tried to pass that off and successfully pass it off, unfortunately, to a lot of people that, hey, this is the proper interpretation.
They read it in law school because it says it's a constitutional study. But, you know, if you're not using the documents from the ratifying conventions of the states, and if you're not reading
notes on the convention,
the build up to it and the aftermath, you're not going to get it. It's a federal form of government. Right. No one ever set up a national. There is no nation. I was originally going to call this book "No Nation," but then I thought about I think it was philosopher Jeremy Bentham. He was talking about something. He said it was nonsense on stilts, and I just thought that was a really cool thing to call it, because it is nonsense on stilts. It's an imaginary nation. We don't know how to read the Declaration of Independence anymore because we've got Gettysburg goggles on, and these Gettysburg goggles cause us to read the history of the Constitution and read the history of the antebellum and colonial periods in the Americas as if a nation was being formed, which never happened. Never.
Right. Not
in 1776, not in 1781 with the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, not with the Constitution of 77 and 78, 1877 and 1888. And to make sure that it wasn't one, there was conditional approval pending a Bill of Rights, which was agitated for by the anti-federalists who were actually federalists, and the federalists who were actually centralizers and monarchists.
I kind of want to go through the book a little bit here. We're not going to be able to cover everything thoroughly, but
no, we're not.
You know, and of course, this This is going to upset a lot of people because it's the hallowed Gettysburg Address, by St. Abraham, but we're going to pick that apart a little bit tonight. So your book, Not Just on Stilts, it deals with more than just the Gettysburg Address, but it really, we kind of use that as a starting
That's a jumping off point.
Yeah. So let's hit the high points if possible, and these are the chapters. And the first chapter is Our Founders Did No Such Thing. And that's kind of what you just started to talk about.
Yeah, our fathers did no such thing, because it begins the first passage in the Gettysburg Address. And all I do is break the chapters into little headings from the Gettysburg Address. And then I talk about them, because the question of the book is, look, I know it's pretty. I know it's inspiring. I know it's mesmerizing. But is it true? Does it correspond to reality as far as it can be documented and known? And it doesn't, not any of it. And so our fathers did no such thing. He starts out by saying, as we all know, 70 years our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. A new nation.
That's not what they did.
In 1776, we had a Continental Association, which was more or less an agreement that we're going to fight these guys together instead of separately.
Right.
Not much to it. Our first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, shored up, and better defined what our relationship was going to be. I called it one of peace and friendship,
right?
Which is a little different than bombing Venezuela, I think. But I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah. Well, and the thing too is the Declaration of Independence. That was not the first declaration. Other states, I think Virginia had already filed their declaration prior to the Declaration of Independence. In fact, I think some of that at least was a model for it.
Yeah, and it's not funny, but the fact of the matter is that was the Constitution, and every state called it the Constitution, the Federated Constitution. So when these folks like Madison and Hamilton and even George Washington, went off to Philadelphia for what they now call the Constitutional Convention, which was not a constitutional convention, only insofar as they were authorized by their states, which were their countries, to modify the Articles of Confederation. Every one of their credentials, and I'll list a bunch of them just to show you that I'm not just making this up. They all say, you have permission to do what needs to be done to the Articles of Confederation.
Yep.
But they showed up with,
brand new plan.
Constitution and plan, and jockeyed for Virginia in particular, showed up and jockeyed for position and brought George Washington to preside over the thing, even though, the doors were shut and the curtains were pulled, and we didn't know who was who until, 20, 30 years later. You've already mentioned that, the Robert Yates diary, the Madison diary, in 1830, they had the constitutional conventions of the various states. That's in Eliot's work. And those are the two documents really that you should be looking at if you want to know what it means.
Yeah. And so in reference to the Gettysburg Address, that famous starting line 7 years ago, we set forth to create a new nation. Our founders didn't do that. The founding
they didn't do it. I'm sorry.
That.
And it's not my fault. It's not my fault they didn't do it. I'm just pointing it out. Don't get mad at me.
Right.
There was no nation, and there is no nation, not at least one that would
of consent.
One of consent, which is the whole purpose of the preamble of the Constitution of the Declaration of Independence. But of course, he only went a certain piece down. He didn't go down to the meat and potatoes of it, which was, this is why we're put together as states, and any state that doesn't toe the line, it's up to the people to alter or abolish their government.
Yeah, but he did offer. He did offer a proposition for us, though.
Oh yeah, he gave us a proposition, but what does it really mean? No one really knows. It certainly wasn't egalitarian. There's nothing in Lincoln's career that suggests that he had any notion of equality between the races. a lot of people will argue that he changed his view on race throughout the war, but there's no evidence of this. I read this book, Colonization After Emancipation, by Page and Magnus, I think his name is.
Right.
And it talks about, from the beginning of the war till his death, he was looking for a place
To send a freed slave.
to send the free slaves.
Let-
He even looked at Texas one time. I mean, he looked at all kinds of places.
Well, I think
And,
they did actually send some to what, Liberia or Haiti?
Yeah, well, we already had Liberia, but whenever the conquering army suggests that you voluntarily go to a foreign country to live, that doesn't bring me any comfort. That voluntary. They tell me that taxes are voluntary. I guess they are. If you don't want them to, run down your
Define voluntary.
run down your house and murder your children and dogs and everything.
Let me ask this,
because you
because
say it's yours.
I think we have to address this too, though, because in the Declaration of Independence, it has that phrase that all men are created equal. And, there is not any, obviously the founding generation didn't believe that. And even the generation during Lincoln's time didn't believe that, at least not in the way we interpret that today.
Not the way we interpret it today, because we're in a world where the individual precedes the community, which is something that was never the case in human history from the Greeks on forward. Man was seen as a social animal or a rational animal who needed social intercourse and became a part of a community. And that community came before him, continued with him, and will continue after him. That's where, and if you read Calhoun, that's where he starts, because they're all classically educated. At least the Southern ones are. And so this tipped on its head the individual.
Well, what did it mean, though? What did they mean by all were created equal, though? I mean, what do you think the understanding was at the time when it was written?
Looking at the correspondence that occurred before the Declaration of Independence, the issue of equality had to do with, just because you're born on this side of the pond versus this side of the pond, we're equal. And they were, if you were born in the Americas under the colonial charters and the agreement made by the kings and others, that they would retain all the rights of Englishmen.
Okay, so yeah.
Now that doesn't mean everyone. That doesn't mean everyone was English. That means that the form of government under which we were operating was clearly an English colonial government. Right. So you would expect it to look kind of like that.
Yeah, but, of course they were subjects and not citizens still. But basically, right. The gist is, okay, if you're a subject in England or if you're a subject in America, that's what they were referring to as far as equal.
That's what I've concluded. And there's a whole lot more that I could go into that we're not going to, because I didn't even do it in my book. I just put a bonus chapter back there. But this is all based on a philosophical notion called social contract theory that was popularized by Hobbes in the 1600s and in the 1700s by John Locke, who is clearly the inspiration of the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, because it's almost entirely, almost word for word. Life, liberty, and property was changed to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the general principles of government by the consent of the governed and self-evident truths and these sort of things all came from there. Of course, it was self-evidently true, 100 years before that the divine right and kings was, self-evident. So right. Self-evidency changes from time to time.
True. But, and I know you've heard of the term proposition nation, and proposition.
Yes.
Mr. Lincoln has a proposition for you, but proposition nation, and that's been taken to mean that this country was created for the sole purpose of making sure that we live up to the idea of all men are created equal, and that's what we've been pushed, but that's not what they meant in the
That comes
Declaration.
from the Gettysburg Address. That comes from the Gettysburg Address when he talks about the dead and the unfinished work that we have to do.
Okay.
And of course, who is we? Presumably a nation, according to Abraham Lincoln, which I feel fairly confident I've made a good argument that there is none, or at least not a legal one. And I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's hit to the next point though, buddy. In the next chapter is a civil what? That's the
A
title
civil
of the
what?
chapter.
Yeah, because I mean, everybody knows what a civil war is. It's not a secret. There's not some secret. I mean, a civil war is two people fighting over the same government. This was not a civil war. It can be called a civil war only if you already have adopted the nationalist point of view, because if it is a nation, it is one thing, not a plurality. If it's a union, it's a plurality. And so his beautiful alibi was that there's a nation that was born on July the 4th, 1776, which of course didn't happen. And it didn't happen with the first and second constitutions. And to my knowledge, there's been no constitutional amendment to create such a thing. And who would pass it? I mean, of course, if you look at the conventions that the states have held, they're very clear about what they're getting into and that they can get out of it if they want to.
Yep.
Particularly New York and Massachusetts, and I believe it was Rhode Island specifically, said that they reserved the right to leave if they're not happy with it.
Yep.
That's the standard. The standard isn't whether or not they're breaking the law, even though that plays into it. The standard is whether or not they're happy, because no one trades one set of government for something that's worse.
Right.
Right? You wouldn't. In social contract theory, you exchange the state of nature for ordered society. And I think it was an unfortunate choice for a couple different reasons that Jefferson used Locke, because Locke was an Enlightenment philosopher who believed a lot of things that were new, and they were in style, and it kind of fit because, we're saying, over here we're equal, over here we're equal. And look at all this stuff the king's done. So if you get past the preamble and start reading what's going on in here, you're going to see that the whole document is a list of things that the king did that was either illegal or pushing the boundaries beyond what they should with a free people, which they consider themselves to be.
And those things happened in past British history as well. That was not the first time that the subjects before we broke away, we were subjects, and later we became citizens.
Right. We were also subjects, and but also a part of a community that we call a state that stuck. South Carolina became a place. Virginia became a place. A political, what would I call it? A polity. It's a polity where people live and work and do their thing. And of course, nobody, and I mean nobody, wanted another
powerful central state like
powerful central state. The problem was that the king started saying that he wasn't in charge anymore, that the parliament could do whatever they wanted. He wouldn't stand between them and the parliament. They had nothing to do with parliament. Parliament didn't exist when they got there. And then they went and said that they could tell us what to do over everything. I mean, all things whatsoever. So we've got a government on the other side of the ocean telling us that they can rule us any way they want to without any permission from us. And that's just not going to go.
Right.
Because these are people who have their own free institutions.
They just happened to be different British colonies.
Right. And their only ties with each other was their proximity to one another. They certainly had very, very different, if you ever read Albion's Seed, which is a very important book about British folkways in America, you'll see that these people came from different places and had very different ideas about what it was that they were doing. Of course, we mostly hear about the Pilgrims, but they're just one of several people that came over here. The Virginians came over to farm and live an aristocratic life because they were second sons and third sons who, because of primogeniture, would not inherit land or substance really in their own country. So this was a place you could come, and the South was billed as a paradise, and it became pretty good, but certainly you have to rough out you got to get the trees down, you got to get the crops up before that can happen, and they eventually did.
And deal with the heat and the mosquitoes. The next chapter is dying in vain. Let's talk about that one.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one because we don't like to dishonor the dead, and my argument is going to be that we're dishonoring them by being dishonest about what they were doing under Lincoln. Like most soldiers, they do what they were told to do, and so I don't really blame them that much. Not as much as I blame the person giving the orders. Let me see if I can find this thing real quick. Dying in vain. Well, the passage says that we have come to dedicate a portion of this field as a final resting place for those who have gave their lives, that this nation, what nation, might live. Brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated far above our own power to add or detract. It is for us living, rather, to be dedicated to the unfinished work. What unfinished work? Which they who fought here have so far nobly advanced and gave the last full measure of their devotion, that we are highly resolved that these dead shall not have died in vain. Now, there's a couple people who over the years have commented on this, so I'm not alone by any stretch of the imagination in interpreting the Gettysburg Address as a swindle. H.L. Mencken said, just put it in normal words, and I'm not sure I have the passage here, but certainly you can look it up. H.L. Mencken on Abraham Lincoln, he said there's nothing farther than the truth that these people were fighting to save a nation. They were fighting to create one, and they weren't fighting for government of, by, and for the people. They were fighting against it.
Yeah, they were fighting to keep people in the union of states that did not want to stay.
They were invading sovereign states. They invaded sovereign states. Now, the North didn't figure out that the game had changed until later. We figured out pretty quick with the Reconstruction. But the boss after that was Washington, or what Lincoln would call the national authority, which is what? I don't know. The government? Is America a government, or is it a place? That's where you need to come down on one of those two things.
Yeah, the central government that was created by the states delegated certain powers, and that supposedly limited one, right?
Well, yeah, but once you get a bunch of attorneys involved, they can make things say just about anything. That's why I think case law is an abomination, and constitutional law, I don't even know what that means. If you and I can't read the documents, and look through and go through the evidence on our own, I mean, it's for the states. This Constitution is not for the federal government. It was for the states and how they were going to operate together in this union, not this nation. And of course, I did mention somewhere in the book, I went through a piece of his first inaugural address where he was talking about his arguments against secession and for the perpetuity of the union.
Right.
And he equivocates union and nation back and forth the whole time. So he'll call it a union, right, and then say something about a nation as though it's the same thing, and then extrapolate from that another premise and another premise. Yeah. So he's a rhetorical genius.
He's a lawyer. He was a railroad lawyer.
Yeah, I mean he's good, but anybody with a little bit of background in critical thinking or logic or anything like that, can clearly see that he's conflating ideas and being a little dishonest. And if you read through it quickly, you won't catch it because these back and forth words that he uses, and he bases his argument on the Constitution supposedly, and not or, and universal law, these two things together.
Well, okay, so how did he define universal law? How did he define universal law?
He didn't. That's the problem.
Okay.
I mean, he says, like, descending from general principles, we can extrapolate that, this is the case. But, you don't get into a union with, unless everyone agrees on what that universal law is, I would think.
Right.
And we never agreed to any universal laws. We agreed to particular delegated powers.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all.
Didn't he refer back to, at some point, I don't know if this was in the Gettysburg Address or earlier, didn't he refer back to the Articles of Confederation, which the Articles of Confederation said something about perpetual union?
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, obviously it was not too perpetual because it was replaced by the Constitution, which did not require all 13. What's that?
Yeah, right. Now, this is what confuses people because
Okay. So,
I've kind of lost it. Back me up a little bit. I'm trying to look at a book and do this.
That's fine. So, but let's
ask the question one more time. I'm sorry.
Well, let's hit the next one because this is another big line that government of some people, by some people, for some people. It is just essentially.
Okay, yeah. So who are they? Who are they for? Well, they're not for the Southern people, that's for sure. And they were members. They were former states. They're not. They didn't drop out of space and all of a sudden decide to ruin America. They were trying to save America, just like the colonial fathers did. They weren't trying to create something new. They were trying to get the king to get out of the way so they continue on with their lifestyle that they have become accustomed to. Right. And that they didn't want armies in their houses, and they didn't want to have to go to England for a trial that they're never going to be found innocent of.
Yeah.
All the things that are listed on the document. I'm convinced that they only teach the Gettysburg Address, and if they teach that, then the Declaration of Independence is going to fall into that.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of one of the big things I wanted to hit too. So, how has this been used? I mean, we kind of explained it, but maybe get a little more in depth. How this has been used to change the popular narrative, where they have this narrative that they've used, and it's popular, and it's what we've been, it's what we've been told for all of our lives, and it goes well beyond that. They've distorted history. What's the impact of that now?
Well, the impact, in my opinion, is that it prevents normal, rational thinking people from being able to see what's right in front of them, because they have cognitive dissonance with two competing ideologies or political ideologies. They know that we're a union, but they also believe we're a nation. It's kind of like equality and diversity being axiomatic in the modern world. How can we all be the same and all be different at the same time? It's impossible. And such a contradiction in terms allows you to spin out anything you want, because you just pick whichever one of these premises that you need for the argument.
So if you're fed a narrative and you're given the narrative before you actually read the material, especially before you read, can't remember the proper term, the principal documents, the
primary documents.
Yeah, original documents. You're going to read that from that narrative. So you're going to try to fit the words to the narrative that you've already been fed and that you've been raised on.
Yeah, and of course that's the way for well into my 30s. I'm 57 now. Well into my 30s, this is what I believed. It's That's what I was taught. I mean, supposedly I have an education, but all I've done the last 25 years is unlearn everything that they taught me. Pretty much. I mean, I got a few, a few skills in learning and philosophy with regards to arguing and following the argument where it leads, which is what I try to do in this book. We take the evidence and we follow it where it leads.
Yeah.
And I have not been able to find a way around the fact that the war that was a French Revolution that created a nation called the United States, just as France had done. Only France was more honest by creating a new constitution and not pretending like it was the same old thing, which it was clearly not.
So what are some of the ways that you think, because I can point them out, but I know that you probably have a little better insight, some of the main ways that this has negatively impacted our country, this worldview, this narrative that we've been fed that's counter to what was actually written, what was actually done, not just during the Civil War, but more importantly, prior to that. What are some of the negative ramifications we're dealing with today because of that, in your opinion?
In my opinion, you can't go from A to B if you don't know where A is. Okay? You can't go from here to there without knowing where here is. And if we don't have some sort of jumping off point for our history that is based in reality, as far as it can be known and documented, that's my, not everything can be known and documented. But what we do is we get as close to the truth as we can with the documents that are available. And we don't leave anything out. If I'm playing chess with you, we need all the pieces on the board.
Right.
Okay. You don't get just to pick and choose what chess pieces you think will be to your advantage. We need them all on the table. Otherwise, the narrative falls short of approaching the truth. Since we don't know where we came from, we not only don't know who we are or where we are, but where we're going and how to correct it, because the South was traitorous against the government, not the country, the government. And slavery has become the red herring that makes it impossible to talk to people. Yeah. So the problem is you can't know where you are or how to get out of it if you don't know how you got there in the first place. And to believe that there's a birthday coming up that's 250 years old. What's 250 years old is that 13 different colonies acting in their own interest declared to the world that they were going to be independent states. Yep. They defined states at the end of it, being able to levy war and all this other stuff. So when we say state today, we think of, South Carolina or Idaho, political or voting districts or some kind of business like that. They're not really looked at as independent
states, independent
entities.
Right.
Right. So, once that's gone, and then you give over the interpretation of the Constitution to the lawyers, especially the ones on the Supreme Court, who are a creation of the Constitution.
Right.
So they have.
And the states created the federal
government. They have a conflict of interest in any time they rule on a constitutional issue, because they are themselves a constitutional issue.
Yeah, they're created, and of course they haven't helped it any with their whole idea of the doctrine of incorporation, which is a totally court-created mindset. That wait a minute, we've incorporated their limits.
Incorporated nobody. Nobody ever incorporated anything except for a judge. And everyone listened to it. Right. You think that the people of 1776 were going to listen to a judge that told them, that the king was A-OK, he was within his rights to do it? Come on. Yeah. That's not going to happen.
But that's what we've been pushed.
Yes.
And most everybody will agree. Okay, the federal government's too big, too powerful.
Yes.
And okay, what do we do about it? Well, some people think we should do a convention of the states, but I'm like, you know what? If you don't understand what was already created and that the states created it and only the states can put the federal government in check, They don't have to go groveling before the federal government. They can put them in check. But it takes backbone to do that. And it takes an understanding that you can do that, and that's not treason. That's not a war. That's not,
It's the most American thing that you can do if we're going to point to the Declaration of Independence as something important in the history, like Mr. Lincoln seems to be saying.
Yep.
He just cut off the piece that made the most sense for his speech, without including the consent of the governed, which was the whole point of the preamble.
Right. So if we could
consent of the governed.
If we could go back and because this is it's going to be the 250th anniversary, and have people focus. Okay, what did that document say? What did it ultimately do? And like you've already said, the 13 independent states declared
the name of it is the Joint Declaration of the 13 United States of America. Yeah. That's the name of the document. That tells you everything you need to know. It's not called the Declaration of Independence. It's called the Joint Declaration of the 13 United States. How many United States? 13 of them, not one, 13. That's why they said these United States up until after the war, and then it was the United States, because they had more manpower and bodies to spare.
Yeah, they wanted it on the battlefield, but they didn't actually. They never legally changed
the idea that might makes right is like saying, I failed my math test, so let me go kick my math teacher's and get me an A because, doggone it, I can.
Right. Right.
So it does. You can't solve problems by that. They say that it solved the issue or proved the issue or whatever they say about the nature of the Union, but it did no such thing. All it did was it tamped down the people who were trying to preserve it.
Basically,
libeled them and invaded them, burnt them out, and occupied them for a decade. Yeah. And the only reason that we got out of it was by agreeing, which is under duress, under any definition of ratifying the 14th Amendment. Of course, we'd already ratified the 13th Amendment, so I'm not really sure what they thought we were. First, they said we couldn't leave.
Yeah.
And then they said we couldn't come back in.
Yeah.
So, these people are just very messed up. And I think it was a big concern of the southern states in particular, but also other people that, a party that only represented one section of the country could win.
Right. Yeah.
How are you going to be in a confederation where one section can dominate the other sections just by sheer numbers?
Yeah.
Which is what happened.
Any closing thoughts? Anything that you want to put out there, or any?
Well, I'd love for folks to get a hold of this book if they'd like to read it.
And it is an excellent book. It's got the thing about the book is not only does it lay out, the problems with the address. It really breaks that down good, and a whole lot more detail than what we can go into on this show. But then at the end, there is the appendix has basically all the supporting documentation.
Right. I've got a piece from the Treaty of Paris, the important part. I've got the Articles of Confederations in there. I've got the sort of a thing that kind of shows the difference between the Articles and the Constitution side by side, and a few other things. The original title of the Declaration before it was messed up before the Committee on Style got a hold of it,
right?
Which changed it to "We the People," and it was "We the People" of these various. Yeah,
and they listed each state, but I think still, and I know that was brought up, but I there's still no denying it was "We the People" of the states, because you had to have 9 of the states. It wasn't just a majority of the people. You still had to have the states.
People knew who the people were.
Right.
The people's will were ascertained through their states, and they were represented through their states. That's why states sent people, to cooperate with the other, or the colonies sent other people to cooperate with the Continentals, who were also doing the same thing.
Let me ask you this: have you ever heard any of the people, for instance, like ones we talked about earlier? You got Beck, you got Levin, you got O'Reilly, and they like to talk. This is one of the things they'll talk about is the Gettysburg Address, and they'll talk about the what's the term? Proposition Nation, okay,
Right, sure.
that the goal is to make sure that everybody's equal, or that, you know, everybody's, rather than just the fact that this document declared the independence. Have you ever had any indication?
That's all it did.
Do they know
Yeah, no,
this? Have they just been sold the narrative and they don't question it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've only met one of the three, and I'm not going to say who it is, but I know that I've given them material personally. So I'm about Lincoln, the real Lincoln, I believe I gave to him. I'm not sure what it was, but you know, if you don't go with the nationalist narrative, you don't have a job. I mean, that's just a fact. That's a fact. So if I was a college professor, which I'm not, I have professed in the past, but I am not a professor.
Right.
What if my research really did bring up this? How long do you think that they would tolerate me in any history department?
Not very long. Not very long.
Not very long. So the best stuff that's coming out is from amateur, and I mean amateur in the highest sense of the word, authors like you had Jeb Smith on here.
Yep.
Who did his Defending Dixie's Land, which in my opinion may be one of the most important Southern books of the 21st century, at least so far.
It was excellent.
And insofar as it could have the same sort of effect that The South Was Right did on a new generation.
Right.
That's my
and that's from somebody way north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Way north, who didn't know what he was getting into, but he had the integrity to follow the argument where it led, which is extremely difficult to do. Extremely difficult to do because it leads you to places you don't want to be. Yeah. So you've either got to decide that the truth is the most important thing, or you've got to decide that, you know, playing along, playing the game, you know, be a self-loathing Southerner, right. Curse your ancestors and all the rest of it.
Right. Well, if we're going to celebrate our 250th anniversary here, you know, people should, because we know even though it's the celebration of the Declaration of Independence, you're going to hear the whole thing about the Gettysburg. You're going to hear that at some point.
Yeah.
Okay?
And
plus you're going to hear a nationalized version of the Declaration. People should go and look these things up. And if you
I invite the reader to go through everything I've done, and please, by all means, if I'm wrong, I need to know it, because I don't want to be wrong. It doesn't help. It doesn't help anything to be wrong. Yeah. You know, it doesn't help anything. If I don't believe in gravity, great, but don't jump off a building, jump off the curb. Yeah. You know, which one is true? You want to test the truth in a way that it's not going to kill you. But, you know, I know what would happen if it was all of a sudden dropped on people that things are not the way they thought they were, because it causes an existential crisis.
People go into shock.
I didn't have an existential crisis. I just had an awakening. I said, how can this be? How can I not know this already? I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and I never even knew that it was burnt down by the Yanks. It was one of the biggest war crimes of the war, and I lived there, and I didn't know.
No, that's how good they are. They don't want you to know those things.
That's how good they are.
Yeah,
and I don't blame my teachers because they didn't know either.
No,
I mean, how many generations does it take to when you centralize, as they did in the 70s, you centralize the Department of Education, and there's a unified sort of coursework going on. What do you think they're going to do? Say, well, you know, we invaded these other states, which is the definition of treason in the Constitution. Yep. And we decided that we thought that the founding generation was wrong, that it should have been a nation, and so therefore we are going to make it a nation. And by nation, I mean, you know, like the modern nation state. Yeah. Germany didn't exist in the 1800s, right? They had to put the thing together through war, which is what happened to us.
Okay. So you this, like I say, is an excellent book. I did read the online copy you sent me, but you've got some others. This is Nonsense on Stilts, the books we were just talking about. Confederophobia
is fun. That's fun. It goes through and talks about. I just used the language of the left, particularly as it relates to hate and fear and phobias, and, you know,
of everything Confederate,
or homophobias or whatever phobias I just adopted that language, and instead of putting their words in there, I used Confederophobia, that people are, they hate and fear things that they don't understand.
Yep.
So it's pretty good. It came out of the beginnings of the 2015, where I believe the whole counter-revolution against the South came out strong.
Yeah.
When the Yankees Come is simply a collection of accounts from the slave narratives that are available online for anyone to read, with a very specific topic. I wanted only the interaction between the former slaves and the Union Army.
Right.
And so I have passages throughout the book. Not some of them are, a sentence long. Some of them are a page and a half long. But it's their words about what happened. And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't paint a pretty picture at all.
No.
And we give this ebook away on Shotwell. If you go to shotwellpublishing.com and sign up for our newsletter, we'll send you an ebook, When the Yankees Come, which is my contribution. And Dr. Clyde Wilson has a small book of essays, just 4 essays. It's very small, called Lies My Teacher Told Me, which apparently pissed off somebody who already used that word, but he's gone on to the other side now.
Right.
Yep. But it was, that was the name of the article that he used.
Yeah. And there's your website.
There's my website. If you want to go and see what kind of nut job I am, that's where you go to find out all about.
Well, hey, thank you for being with us, and love to have you back sometime. You
Anytime.
have any other books? Any other books in the works?
Man, we've got some good ones. Okay, I already told you about Quantrell. We also have a book of essays by Joseph Strongberg on the South, who is one of the he's forgotten more than most people have ever known about the South. We have, if you've ever heard of the Emma LeConte diary, it was done by Nebraska Press probably 20 or 30 years ago, but we have someone go back to the actual diary and rewrite, go back through it. And of course, I know it's going to be hard to believe there were some mistakes and omissions in the transcription, but we're straightening it all out. The introduction is by James Kibler, who is a poet and author of fiction and also nonfiction, a very, very, very well-grounded scholar. And we actually have a book that coming out about the Southern accent and how it is the motivation and also the sort of the line on which music, particularly country and Appalachian type of music, come. The accent itself is a musical type of things that were built onto it. I can't remember exactly what the whole argument is, but it's going to be very fascinating. There hasn't been any books on the Southern accent, especially as it relates to American music, which is Southern music, with the exception of maybe show tunes.
Right.
That's probably about it.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, once again, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate your time.
I appreciate you having me on. Gosh, I wish we had more time. There's so much to talk about, but maybe we'll get to do it again. And I'm excited to see Chris coming on with that new book coming out. It's going to be nice.
Absolutely.
He's very smart. Very smart.
Well, hey, take care. Thanks again. You have a good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. And now I'd like to talk with the audience about a few things and pick up where we left off earlier. I don't believe D.C. is salvageable, Trump or no Trump, and eventually he will be out of office. Anyway, when that happens, I fully expect any of the good things he's done to be pretty much reversed. And that can happen sooner if the GOP, which is all but worthless if they lose the midterms, in either situation. And really now we really need strong, constitutionally minded governors and state legislatures to challenge federal overreach. In Tennessee, the obvious choice for governor, in my opinion, is Monty Fritz. He will be here on our show next week. He'll be on the second show. Now, you don't want to miss that. Now, what we're going to do with Monty, he's just going to give a little campaign update, and then he's going to take questions. So you can, if you got a question in the chat, if you call in, he'll take your questions. Now, like I said, we need to send more legislators like Monty to the General Assembly. If we get Monty in the governor's office, but keep most of the current crop of feckless Republicans, we can expect them to attempt to undermine him. Let's talk a little more specifics about our state government and the so-called leaders that we have. Bill Lee has been a terrible governor, in my opinion, and a big disappointment to many. I never really had high hopes for him, but I did think the people around him in his first campaign, his first term, could keep him from doing anything too stupid. I was wrong. He ignored most of his conservative supporters and hired Democrats from out of state for his staff. He brought in Penny Schwinn to the education department and refused to stop taking refugees when given the option by Trump in 2019. He sends his staff to kill bills in committee. That's not the job of the governor. The governor's job is not to send his staff down to a committee where legislation is working its way through the system and say, hey, tell them that we oppose this bill. Well, if he opposes it, he can veto it. And in Tennessee, the governor's veto can be overridden with the same percentage that passed the bill initially. There's his phony constitutional carry bill supported by the legislature. And more recently, the Hughes versus Lee case. Now, the Hughes versus Lee case has to do with, this is just Tennessee law. This is not federal law. This doesn't involve, per se, the Second Amendment. It's actually Section 26 of the Tennessee Constitution. And, it says we have a right to keep and bear arms, although the legislature can regulate the wearing of arms with a view to reduce crime. But earlier state Supreme Court opinions have pretty much said that the current codes, the way the codes, the intent to go armed code is written, that it violates our state constitution. Now, we're not even talking about the Bruin opinion. We're just talking state level. So Hughes versus Lee, Hughes was filed and I don't remember the specifics of it, but they filed it and the state lost. Lee lost the case and he appealed it. So he's appealing, our governor's appealing our right to keep and bear arms. Even though there's state Supreme Court's precedent that says that we have that right, and even though the court that they took it to said, no, hey, Governor, this legislation, your current intent to go armed law is unconstitutional. And we've had legislators for years, we've been trying to get the intent to go armed law taken out. We've had a Republican supermajority for about 10 or 12 years now and haven't been able to do it. That's ridiculous, especially in Tennessee. The state that's known for shooting stuff, you can't legally carry a weapon without a permit, or you have very limited. Put it this way, if you carry it without a permit, there are a lot of places you can't legally carry it, more so than if you get the permit. Bottom line is, in the state, our permit should be Section 26. Okay, the state government has also approved a 59% increase in spending over the last roughly 7 years. This is what the Lee administration and all of the different general assemblies over the last 7 years have done. Went from a 59% increase, went something like 37 million or billion to 59 billion. And they're talking about adding some more this year. That's the rumor, that they're going to ask for probably another $5+ billion. They approved the patently unconstitutional voucher plan. Okay, our state constitution clearly states that state dollars are for public schools. It doesn't say anything about giving state dollars to private schools. They want to expand that program. This year they intend to expand it. Oh, by the way, that's going to include allowing vouchers to go to Islamic schools. That's going to be one of their pushes this year. I mean, they're not going to say that, oh, we're going to give it to the Islamists, but they're going to give it to the Islamists, as well as to other people. But I have a problem with that, and I think many of you do too. They do pass laws sometimes that sound good on paper, but they really don't have any teeth. Give you an example, there was a law passed that had to do with the transgender issue in the schools. Now, the state passed a law and said, you cannot, I think this had to do with the locker room usage, where you could not have a tranny in a trans guy in a girl's locker room or shower or whatever. Well, they passed the law, but it still happened in Williamson County. Instead of the state putting a stop to it and fixing it and holding the people at that school responsible, well, they passed a law where the parents can sue. That doesn't make sense to me. If it's a state law, and oh, by the way, the schools are state funded, why doesn't the state just come down and say, hey, look, guys, we're going to fire the people that are doing this. We're going to fire you, fine you, jail you, whatever. Do something. It shouldn't be, okay, parents, if you want the law passed, or the law upheld that we passed, then you'll have to take them to court. Well, what about the families that can't afford to go to court? Anyway, if they write a law, it should have teeth. They have failed to address executive overreach or amend the emergency powers that allowed Bill Lee to be a petty tyrant during COVID. They rail against D.C., yet promote D.C./UN programs on our state website. They have failed to address voting concerns while gloating about Tennessee being number one in with a near meaningless metric. They refuse to honor their oaths and ensure the Tennessee Guard only deploys when wars are declared. They refuse to nullify unconstitutional federal laws consistently, yet make an exception for the Second Amendment. This goes back to the Lee versus Hughes case, because bottom line, after Bruin was passed, and based on what our state AG told us on the nullification bill, he says the nullification is unconstitutional, federal government supreme in all things, and that the Supreme Court's the final arbiter. Okay, well, if he believed that, and he believed it for the nullification bill, but when it came to the Hughes versus Lee case, even though that involved a state law, then you would have thought his response would have been, well, it violates Bruin, so we're going to go along with it. But they're selective. For some reason, they just do not want us to fully enjoy our Second Amendment and our Section 26 rights. Some of them are on record as stating that the legislator can pass anything they want regardless of the Declaration of Rights. Now, the Declaration of Rights in the Tennessee Constitution is Article 1. It's right up front. It's right there. Okay. I want to read a little bit of this. That all power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they shall have at all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they think proper. Now, by reading this, it says at all times. This is not talking about the process for a constitutional amendment. This is the process. It doesn't give a lot of details, but it says we have the right. It's inherent in the people to, at all times, alter, reform, or abolish the government in such a manner as they think proper. It's up to the people. We may have to look at this. We may have to look at exactly how we go about doing that. Section 2 here, I want to read that. The government being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. But you know what? Our legislature, our state legislature, grovels before the federal government all the time, just like most others do. And that also applies to us. We need to make sure we hold our state legislature responsible. We need to hold them accountable. If you just ignore the state level and you only focus on federal, they get a pass. The state legislators, those are the only ones that take an oath to uphold both the state and U.S. Constitution. Excuse me. So to me, they are really the ones that we should be putting more pressure on. They have refused to close the primaries, the GOP primaries, or the primaries in general. And now one of the problems we have in Tennessee is, we are a supermajority Republican state, but we have a lot of Democrats that are able to vote in our open primaries. And within the party, They passed a law this year. Now, even though the parties are supposed to be private entities, they banned us from party caucuses in many cases. I think there are some exceptions to that, but that should be the party's decision. If the county party, if they want to do a caucus, they should be able to do a caucus. Now, I understand caucuses were never allowed for state offices. For instance, they were not allowed for state rep or state senator, but county level and judicial races. But they changed that on their own. And that's, like I say, we're supposed to be a private party. There's the so-called leaders that we have in our state, such as Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, who shamed our state by his online affair with a young homosexual that was lampooned on Saturday Night Live. But in an unofficial vote of confidence after this incident, the Senate kept him in office. As I recall, only about 7 senators said that he should step down. Then there's Speaker Sexton, who allegedly had an affair. I won't go, I can't prove that he had an affair. That was one of the allegations. There is some indication that he's not living or was not living at one time in his district. His most recent escapade involved speeding in a construction zone with his Tennessee Highway Patrol driver at the wheel. I think he was doing something like 80 and a 55, and it was a construction zone. You probably have seen the video of it where the THP driver has a confrontation with the local police that pulled him over. Now, you cannot arrest a a representative or a senator on their way to session when session is in, but session's not in right now. And they basically accused the local police officer of being a little overzealous. And let's not forget Senator Yeager, Senator Ken Yeager, his recent piss drunk episode at a hit and run DUI in Georgia. That was an embarrassment, but hey, he's still there. He's still there. And when I say still there, I'm talking about in leadership, okay? This is ridiculous that these people, first off, it's a shame that their districts would reelect them. But to make it worse, the General Assembly as a whole has reelected these people to in most cases, leadership positions. There's Representative Faison, who I think is the majority leader or floor leader. Now, this happened several years ago. He attempted to pull down the pants of a referee at his son's basketball game over a call he didn't like. 45-year-old man getting down there and trying to pants a referee at a high school basketball game because he didn't like the call. Yeah, we got some real class acts in our legislature. Let's not forget the practice of leadership killing bills in committee and putting the word out on a bill not to vote for it. Now, the governor does this, and then the leadership will do it. Because if your bill doesn't get through committee, it's not going to get the floor, it's not going to pass. Bills live or die in committee. And this will happen a lot. Hey, McNally has said this bill should, better not pass this committee. He'll put that pressure on that committee chair. And usually the others will follow. That means a lot of times good conservative Republican legislation can't even get a motion, certainly can't get a second. And we've had those kind of things happen. The governor will send in some of his staff to testify against legislation. The governor's not supposed to be part of the legislative, the lawmaking policy, part of it. That's not his job. His job is to execute the laws. If he disagrees with the law, then he can veto it. Like I say, it can be easily overturned. Or if he disagrees with it, he can just not sign it. After 10 days, it becomes law without his signature. A lot of times the governor will say he doesn't want something, so therefore leadership will put the word out, hey, don't pass this bill. That means all of the representatives for the different citizens across the different districts in the state of Tennessee are being undermined. The things that they want to see passed are being undermined by leadership and by the governor and by his staff. The citizens of Tennessee definitely need to do a better job of electing legislators as well as our governor. Our state constitution, Article 1, says the following. I think we actually already read this. I'm going to read it again, though. All power is inherent in the people, And all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. For the advancement of those ends, they shall have of all times an unalienable and indefeasible right to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they may think proper. And like I say, that is not laid out in the state constitution how you do that. It cannot be referring to the amendment process. So we may have to figure this out. We just may have to figure out how we go about doing this. Section 2, the government being instituted for the common benefit. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. So, once again, those are in our state constitution. Article 1, Declaration of Rights, right up front. By the way, you need to go read that Declaration of Rights, because all of those things in the Declaration of Rights are supposed to be off limits from the state legislature to even make laws about. They're supposed to be off limits, but they're not, unfortunately. Okay, I don't know how this session is going to turn out. It's an election year, so it'll be short. It will be ugly. They will try and get out of there as fast as possible. They will probably try to avoid passing anything of substance so that they can't get hammered. And of course, they're going to want to get home. They can't raise money while they're in session. So they will try to make it short and sweet. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Thanks again to David Baldwin for his generous donation and support. We really appreciate it, Dave. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The Stewart and Henry County chapter of the TFA will meet this Thursday, January 8th, 7 p.m. at the Stewart County Visitor Center. You don't have to be a member to attend. Okay, there is a meet and greet with Monty Fritz. He's running for governor in 2026. If you're a Christian, a conservative, and support the U.S. and Tennessee Constitution, you should really come hear Monty speak on his values and plans for Tennessee. This is January 19th, 2026. It's from 1 to 3 p.m. This is MLK Day, so some people will be off. It's at the New Moon Restaurant, 711 Park Avenue, Lebanon, Tennessee. That's January 19th, 1 to 3:15 p.m., New Moon Restaurant, 711 Park Avenue, Lebanon, Tennessee. The capacity is 70 people, so it will be a small group. You can ask Monty personally anything, any question you want to. There's also a Monty house meet and greet in the Mount Juliet Dale Webb community at 4 p.m. This event will require an RSVP from the host to ensure there is space. Contact Rick Julian at 630-730-2009 if you want to attend this event at this private residence. And that's Rick Julian, 630-730-2009. Our guest next Monday will be author James C. Chris Edwards to discuss his upcoming book on the infamous William Clark Cantrell and the raids on Lawrence, Kansas in 1863. Does Quantrell deserve the reputation for cruelty and brutality he's been assigned, or is he another victim of the favored narrative? Was Lawrence a defenseless town comprised mostly of women and children, or were the men and soldiers just caught off guard? Our next show for our second hour next week, our guest, as I said earlier, will be Monty Fritz, candidate for governor, who will give us a short update and then take questions. Take the time to check out our sister shows also appearing on My Paris TV, The Mike Weatherford Show and Sportscast with Jeremy Bucklow. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Mike has Samuel Bryant, who is the candidate for mayor of Madison County, which includes the city of Jackson. Find out all about him and why he's running. Next Saturday on Sportscast, Next Sunday on Sportscast, Jeremy welcomes Lester Miller and Stacy Kettles from the International Hot Rod Association, giving the lowdown on drag racing and the future of the IHRA. Thanks again for tuning in tonight. If you enjoyed tonight's program, please take a moment to click the subscribe button. Help us to reach the next milestone of 1,000 subscribers. I know everyone asks you to subscribe to their channel, but it really does go a long way towards the success as a media outlet for your viewers. So that's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.